The evening light in Dry Creek filtered through dusty windows, bathing the town in a rusty gold glow. Inside the Scarlet Rose Saloon, music drifted from an old piano that had seen better days, while laughter and the clink of whiskey glasses filled the smoky air. The men gathered there didn't come for the music, or even the liquor, they came for the women. Clara moved through the haze like a ghost in a bright dress. Her smile was painted on, practiced and steady, the same smile she had worn for nearly 3 years now. She carried a tray of glasses with perfect grace, balancing it despite the rowdy hands that sometimes tried to tug her close. She knew how to laugh at the right time, how to flick her blonde hair over her shoulder just enough to keep the men coming back, and how to keep her heart hidden under layers of charm. But beneath the sequins, the rouge, and the bright chatter, Clara's spirit was tired. She was only 22, yet her eyes held the weight of someone far older. Every evening was the same: loud voices, drunken boasts, and whispers that made her feel smaller than she wanted to admit. She had never intended to end up in a saloon. Once, long ago, she had dreamed of teaching children in a little schoolhouse, of having a family, of being loved for who she was. But life had a way of shattering tender dreams. Clara's father had died young, leaving debts that swallowed her family whole. Her mother, sick and weary, passed soon after. Clara, left with nothing, had wandered from town to town, searching for honest work. With no kin to take her in, and no man willing to wed a girl with no dowry, she had little choice. When she stepped into the Scarlet Rose for the first time, she thought she was just taking a serving job. But the saloon demanded more than serving drinks. It demanded that she smile flattered, and dance with men who looked at her with hungry eyes. The shame of it clung to her every day, no matter how well she pretended it didn't. Sometimes, when the piano was soft and the laughter dulled to a low hum, she would drift to the far corner of the saloon, near the window, and gaze out at the wide-open land beyond the street. She imagined herself out there, far from the clinking glasses and leering stares, on a porch of her own, with the smell of bread baking inside and a baby's laughter ringing in the air. She longed for it so deeply that it ached, but every time she dared to imagine a better life, someone reminded her of who she was now. Once a saloon girl, always a saloon girl, the barkeep muttered when she asked if he thought she'd ever leave. The words cut her, because part of her feared he was right. Men wanted her for a night's amusement, not for a lifetime of love. She knew it too well, and yet hope refused to die in her. Clara had a habit of hiding scraps of paper under her mattress, torn advertisements from newspapers or handbills left behind by travelers. She studied them in the quiet hours of the night. After the saloon had emptied, they spoke of mail-order brides needed in faraway places, women willing to marry men they had never met, to begin new lives on distant ranches and homesteads. Clara traced the printed words with her finger as though they were a promise. Could I, she often wondered, could I leave this behind and start again? The thought scared her as much as it thrilled her. What man would want her if he knew the truth? And what if her past followed her, like a shadow that could never be outrun? That evening, as she carried another tray through the crowded saloon, her eyes drifted again to the window. The sun was sinking, setting the horizon ablaze with streaks of orange and purple. For a brief, fragile moment, Clara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. She clung to that tiny spark of hope the way a drowning woman clings to driftwood, because no matter how much she smiled or danced or laughed at the men's crude jokes, she was not just a saloon girl. Deep inside, she was still Clara, the girl who dreamed of love, of home, and of a future where her name was not whispered with shame, but spoken with respect. And though she did not yet know it, someone was about to see her, not as a saloon girl at all, but as the woman she had always longed to be. The night air in Dry Creek was cooler than the heat inside the Scarlet Rose. After hours of laughter, music, and smoke, Clara finally slipped out the back door, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She liked these stolen moments of quiet when the stars scattered across the velvet sky and the moonlight softened the dust of the street. It was the only time she could breathe without feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on her. She walked to her small, rented room above the dressmaker's shop. The landlady tolerated her presence but barely spoke, her disapproval clear. Clara didn't blame her. Respectable women had no reason to befriend a saloon girl. Still, the little room was hers, and inside it she could close the door against the world. On the rickety wooden table by the bed lay a folded sheet of newspaper, worn and creased from being read too many times. Clara lit the oil lamp and carefully smoothed the paper flat. Her eyes went straight to the column she knew by heart: Wives Wanted in the West. The words always set her heart racing. They spoke of men in faraway towns, ranchers, farmers, miners, men who lived alone in the wilderness and longed for wives to share their homes. Strong women with a brave spirit. One advertisement read, hardworking ladies ready to help a man build a life. Another promised, good land, good cattle, and a good future for the right woman. Clara leaned closer, her blue eyes tracing every word. She imagined herself packing up and leaving Dry Creek behind forever. No more smoky saloon. No more false smiles. Just wide open skies, fresh bread baking in a kitchen, and a husband who would look at her not as entertainment, but as a partner. She picked up a scrap of paper and a stub of pencil she had saved from her childhood. Her hand trembled as she began to write. Dear Sir, my name is Clara Bennett. I am 22 years of age, healthy, and strong of character. I can cook simple meals, sew, and keep a tidy home. I have no family left, but I long for a home of my own. I wish for a husband who is kind, honest, and willing to build a life together. I promise to be loyal and hardworking in return. Her words looked neat, almost too careful. They painted the picture of a woman she wanted to be, not the woman she was. She stopped, staring at the page. Should she mention the saloon? Should she confess her past, the shame that followed her like a shadow? Her chest tightened. No man would write back if he knew. She had seen how people judged her. She had heard the whispers and felt the sneers. If she told the truth, her letter would go straight into the fire. She bit her lip, tears pricking her eyes. If I hide it, am I lying? But if I tell it, I will never have a chance. With trembling hands, Clara folded the letter without adding the part of her life she wanted most to forget. She sealed it inside an envelope and pressed it to her chest for a moment. For the first time in years, she let herself hope. The next morning, before the town stirred fully awake, Clara walked to the post office. The clerk barely looked at her as he stamped the envelope and slid it into the outgoing pile. As the letter disappeared, Clara felt both lighter and more afraid. She had set her future into motion, but whether it would bring freedom or heartbreak, she did not know. Days turned into weeks. Each evening she worked in the saloon as usual, but her thoughts drifted constantly to the mail stagecoach that arrived. Twice a week, she began stopping by the post office more often than she dared admit, pretending to be uninterested as she asked if there was anything for her. The clerk's shake of the head became a familiar sight. Then, one crisp morning, when the leaves of autumn were beginning to scatter along the dirt street, the clerk finally slid an envelope across the counter. Clara's breath caught in her throat when she saw her name scrawled in a firm, masculine hand. She carried it back to her little room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Sitting at the edge of her bed, she opened the letter. With shaking fingers, the words inside were simple but kind. Dear Miss Bennett, my name is Henry Talbot. I am a farmer near Clearwater, Wyoming. I am 30 years of age and own a modest piece of land. Your letter spoke to me, and I believe we may suit one another. If you are willing, I would be glad to pay your travel expenses and bring you here to start a new life. Clara pressed the letter to her lips, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time in years, the dream of leaving Dry Creek seemed real. A door had opened. She didn't know that this door would not lead where she expected. She didn't know rejection still waited for her, sharp, humiliating, and public. But, for now, sitting in her small room with the lamplight glowing softly around her, Clara allowed herself to hope. The Scarlet Rose was louder than usual that Saturday night. A poker game in the corner had drawn a crowd. The piano man was pounding away with more energy than talent, and the whiskey flowed like a river. Clara moved through the room with her usual forced smile, balancing a tray of glasses. But inside, her heart was racing for a very different reason. She had written back to Henry Talbot, the farmer from Wyoming. His second letter had arrived just a week ago, more detailed than the first. He described his land rolling hills, a small cabin he'd built with his own hands, and plans to expand once he had a wife by his side. He had even enclosed enough money for her train fare, urging her to come soon before winter. Clara had wept when she read it. It sounded like everything she had ever dreamed of. She hadn't told anyone, of course. The saloon girls often gossiped, and the barkeep would laugh at the idea of her becoming someone's bride. Still, she allowed herself tiny moments of joy. She was finally leaving Dry Creek, but the dream shattered sooner than she ever imagined. That evening, a group of strangers had come into the saloon. Among them was a broad-shouldered man in a clean coat, his boots polished, his hair slicked neatly back. Clara didn't pay him much mind. At first, he looked like the sort of man passing through town on cattle business. But when their eyes met, across the smoky room, something in his expression made her falter. Recognition. The man leaned toward one of his companions and whispered something. A ripple of laughter followed. Clara's stomach sank. She turned quickly, pretending to busy herself with the tray. Moments later, the man rose and walked straight toward her. Clara Bennett, he asked, his voice carrying just enough to draw nearby attention. She froze, clutching the tray against her chest. Yes, sir. The man gave a cold smile. I thought so. You're the same Clara Bennett who wrote me letters. Told me you were a sweet, respectable young lady looking for a home. A hush fell over the tables nearest them. Clara's cheeks flamed hot. This was Henry Talbot, the farmer who had written her such kind words, who had invited her into a new life. And now here he was, standing in the Scarlet Rose, eyes sharp with disdain. Her voice trembled. Mr. Talbot, I can explain. Explain. He gave a harsh laugh. You hid it, didn't you? Hid the truth. Thought you could trick me into marrying a saloon girl. The words stung like a slap. Every man in earshot turned to look at her. Some smirked knowingly, others shook their heads. Whispers spread fast. Mail order bride. Saloon girl. Liar. Clara's throat closed. She wanted to vanish into the floor. I never meant to deceive you, she whispered. I only wanted a chance. Henry's eyes narrowed. A chance. To drag my name through the mud. To shame me with a wife who's been touched by every man who passes through this town. His words dripped with cruelty, each one louder than the last, ensuring everyone heard. Gasps and laughter rippled through the crowd. The piano player stopped, silence heavy in the smoky room. Clara's tray slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor. She backed away, tears burning her eyes, but there was nowhere to go. The stairs followed her like knives. Once a saloon girl, always a saloon girl, Henry spat. You'll never be more than this. With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out, his boots echoing across the wooden floor. The laughter resumed, sharper now, directed at her. Some men hooted, others muttered crude remarks. Clara ran from the saloon, her heart pounding in her chest, shame choking her like smoke. Out in the cool night air, she leaned against the wall, trembling. Tears spilled freely, streaking her carefully painted face. Her letter, the letter she had clung to like salvation, had become the source of her greatest humiliation. The dream of Wyoming, the dream of being a bride, was gone. She pressed her hands to her chest, gasping for breath. Inside, the laughter still carried through the walls. She felt like the world had collapsed, crushing the fragile hope she had dared to hold. But somewhere, unseen in the shadows across the street, a man had watched it all. A tall, broad-shouldered rancher with weathered hands and steady eyes. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh at Clara's humiliation. His jaw tightened, and something fierce rose within him. That man's name was Wyatt Carter, and though Clara didn't know it yet, he would be the one to offer her what Henry never could have future-built, not on judgment, but on love. The night, Clara fled the Scarlet Rose in tears. The dusted streets of Dry Creek were quieter than usual. Lanterns glowed in the windows, and a lone dog barked in the distance. She hurried down the alley, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders, desperate to escape the mocking laughter that still rang in her ears. Wyatt Carter had been leaning against the hitching post outside the Mercantile when the scene unfolded. He wasn't a man who frequented the Scarlet Rose liquor, and noise never held his interest. But he'd been in town late, picking up supplies before heading back to his ranch. He heard the saloon doors swing open, heard the laughter spill out, and then saw her Clara Benetrion as if the world had caved in on her. He had noticed her before. Everyone in Dry Creek knew of Clara, the saloon girl with the painted smile, but where others saw scandal, Wyatt had always seen something different. He saw the way her eyes carried sorrow, the way she looked out the saloon window at the horizon, as if her soul wanted to be anywhere but there. Tonight, with her face streaked with tears, he saw the truth clearer than ever. Clara was not what the town claimed her to be. She was a woman trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. Wyatt straightened and stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dirt. Miss Bennett. Clara spun around, startled, her eyes red from crying, widened when she saw him, a tall man with broad shoulders, dressed in a simple shirt and dusty hat. His presence calm and steady. She quickly wiped at her cheeks. Please, just leave me be. Wyatt didn't move closer, sensing how fragile she was in that moment. His voice was low, even, the kind that carried strength without force. I saw what happened in there. Clara's stomach twisted with shame. Then you saw enough to know what I am, she said bitterly, her arms folded tightly around herself, as though bracing against another blow. Wyatt's eyes softened. I saw a man speak cruelly to a woman who didn't deserve it. Her lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. She had expected mockery, maybe pity, but not this quiet defense. You don't understand, she whispered. He was right. I thought I could change things, leave this life behind. But no one will ever let me forget what I am. Wyatt tilted his head, studying her. He didn't see a fallen woman. He saw someone worn down by hardship, someone still fighting to keep a spark of hope alive. What you are, he said firmly, is a woman who's been dealt a hard hand. That don't make you less, and it sure don't give a man the right to treat you like dirt. The words broke something inside her. She shook her head, tears threatening again. Kindness like yours, it doesn't last. Folks might say sweet words for a moment, but in the end, everyone turns away. Wyatt stepped closer this time, slow and steady, until he stood just near enough that she could see the sincerity in his weathered face. Not everyone. Clara's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her heart. Still, something about him, his steady gaze, his lack of judgments, oozed her frayed nerves. For the first time since Henry's cruel rejection, she felt seen, not as a saloon girl, not as a scandal, but as herself. Why do you care? She asked softly, almost accusingly. You don't even know me. Wyatt's jaw tightened, his voice gentle yet unshakable. Maybe I don't, but I know enough. I know you're not the sum of what folks whisper. I know you've got a good heart. I can see it in your eyes. Clara and I know a man would be a fool not to see past the paint and the gossip. The night grew still around them, the air heavy with unspoken words. Clara lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. She had spent years building walls to protect herself, but in a matter of minutes, this cowboy had chipped away at them with nothing more than steady truth. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Wyatt replied. He tipped his hat slightly, a small gesture of respect. "Just don't let one man's cruelty make you forget your worth." With that, he turned and walked toward his horse, giving her the space she needed. Clara stood frozen, watching him go, her heart tangled in confusion. She wasn't sure who Wyatt Carter really was or why he'd spoken kindness when no one else would, but something in her soul shifted that night. For the first time in a long while, Clara wondered if maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. And though she didn't know it, this quiet cowboy would soon step back into her life in a way that would change everything. The days after Henry Talbot's cruel rejection dragged by like heavy stones tied to Clara's feet. Inside the Scarlet Rose, whispers followed her wherever she went. Men chuckled when she passed, some even mocking her, directly asking if she was still writing letters to lonely farmers, or if she was planning to trick another poor soul. Each word cut deep, but Clara learned to keep her head high, to smile as if none of it mattered. But it did matter. Every laugh, every sneer reminded her of the truth she already feared. No one in Dry Creek would ever let her escape the shadow of being a saloon girl. One late afternoon, after another long night of forced smiles, Clara walked toward the well. At the edge of town, she carried a small bucket, eager for a moment away from the noise of the saloon. The autumn air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of hay and woods. For a fleeting second, she felt almost normal, like an ordinary woman fetching water for her home. She bent to lower the bucket when she heard rough voices behind her. "Well, if it isn't the bride who never was," one of the ranch hands from the saloon drawled. His two companions chuckled, circling closer. They weren't drunk this time, just mean. "What's the matter, Clara?" "Farmer boy changed his mind once he figured out what kind of bride you'd be." Clara stiffened, keeping her eyes on the bucket. "I'm not looking for trouble." The men laughed. "Trouble? Ain't no trouble, just curious. What kind of husband are you hunting now? Another fool with a big ranch? Or maybe you're hoping for a rich man who doesn't care about your past?" Her cheeks burned. She tried to walk past them, clutching the bucket, but one of the men stepped in her path. "Don't be shy, sweetheart. We all know what you're good for." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Got?" Clara gasped, fear rising sharp in her chest. "Let me go." Before the man could tighten his grip, a deep voice cut through the air like a whip. "Let her go." The men froze, glancing toward the road. Wyatt Carter sat tall on his horse, his face shadowed beneath his hat, his gaze sharp as steel. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in his tone left no room for argument. The ranch hand sneered, trying to cover his unease. "We're just having a little fun. No harm in talking." Wyatt swung down from his horse, his boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. He closed the distance slowly, deliberately, every step radiating calm danger. "You call that fun? Looks to me like you're harassing a lady." The word lady struck Clara harder than anything else. No one in Dry Creek had called her that in years. The ranch hand's smirk faltered. He let go of Clara's wrist, muttering, "Fine, we were just leaving." With that, he and his companions shuffled off, glancing nervously over their shoulders. Wyatt waited until they were gone before turning to Clara. His eyes softened, losing their edge. "You all right?" Clara rubbed her wrist, her voice shaky. "Yes, thank you. They weren't going to stop." "They won't bother you again," Wyatt said firmly. He picked up her bucket, filling it easily at the well, and handed it back to her. "Here." Clara accepted it with trembling hands. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Wyatt looked at her steadily, his voice low. "Because no woman deserves to be treated that way. Not you, not anyone." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her past pressed down. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Everyone thinks I deserve it. They see me as nothing, but I don't care what they see." Wyatt interrupted gently but firmly. "I see a woman who's had more courage than most. You hold your head up in a town that tries to tear you down every chance it gets. That's strength. Clara, don't let them make you forget it." Her eyes shimmered with tears. For so long she had lived under the labels others gave her: saloon girl, shameful, unworthy. Now here was a man who saw her differently, who spoke as if her worth was not lost, only hidden. Clara managed a small, trembling smile. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to," Wyatt said, tipping his hat. "Just remember, what folks say about a person tells you more about them than it does about you." He mounted his horse again, nodding once before turning back toward the road. Clara watched him ride away, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she felt something she had nearly forgotten. Not shame, not fear, but hope. The days after Wyatt had stepped in at the well lingered in Clara's mind like a half-remembered dream. She kept replaying it: the way his voice had cut through the air, the way he'd looked at her with respect instead of pity, the way he'd called her a lady. No one had done that in years. But dreams didn't change the fact that every night, she still had to pin on her fake smile and walk into the Scarlet Rose. The laughter, the grasping hands, the gears. They all felt heavier now. The humiliation she had endured from Henry Talbot still hung over her like a storm cloud, and though she tried to keep her head high, inside she felt fragile, like a bird with a broken wing. One evening, just as the lamps inside the saloon flickered to life, Clara stepped outside to draw a breath of fresh air before facing another night. She leaned against the wooden post, her eyes drifting out to the horizon, where the sunset painted the sky with streaks of orange and violet. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A tall, familiar figure rode into view, his horse moving with the easy grace of a creature well cared for. Wyatt Carter. Her heart skipped. He dismounted and tied his reins to the post, his movements steady and unhurried. He tipped his hat when his eyes met hers. "Evenin', Miss Bennett." Clara smoothed her skirt nervously. "Mr. Carter, I didn't expect to see you here. I was in town for supplies," he said simply. Then, after a pause, his gaze softened. "Truth be told, I was hoping I might see you." Clara's breath caught. Wyatt looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "Because you deserve better than this place. Better than the way folks treat you." She dropped her gaze, her throat tightening. "It's the only life I've got. A woman like me doesn't get a second chance." "That's where you're wrong." His voice was quiet but firm. "Everyone deserves a second chance." She looked up at him, startled by the conviction in his eyes. "Even me. Especially you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Wyatt drew a deep breath, his expression steady. "Clara, I've got a ranch about 10 miles from here. It's not fancy, but it's mine. I've got good cattle, good land, and a house that could use a woman's touch. I live there alone, and truth be told, it gets mighty lonesome." Her heart began to race. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'd like you to come there." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her mind spinning. Wyatt continued, his voice calm but earnest. "I'm not asking you for anything you don't want to give. I'm not saying it's love yet, or that it has to be. What I'm saying is if you're tired of this life, if you want something new, I'll give you that chance. A safe place, a fresh start, a home." Tears pricked her eyes. It sounded too good to be true, too much like the dream she had once written in those letters to Henry Talbot. But this wasn't words on paper, this was a man standing in front of her, offering her freedom without judgment. Her voice trembled. "Why me? You could find someone else, someone without my past." Wyatt's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. "Because I don't give a damn about your past. I care about the woman I see right now. Strong, brave, kinder than this town deserves. That's who I want by my side." Clara pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart twisting. Hope warred with fear inside her. She had dreamed of escape for so long. But the thought of trusting again, of risking more humiliation, more heartbreak terrified her. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. Wyatt took a step closer, his voice softer now. "You don't have to decide tonight. Think on it. But know this, I'm not offering charity. I'm offering respect. And maybe, if you'll let me, more than that someday." The saloon doors banged open behind her, laughter spilling out into the night. Clara flinched, reminded of the life that waited inside. Then she looked back at Wyatt, the steady rancher, who, with just a few words, made her believe in the possibility of something better. For the first time in years, she felt the faint stirrings of courage. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could take the risk. And if she did, maybe her broken wings could finally heal. The morning Clara left the Scarlet Rose behind, she half expected to wake and find it had been a dream. But there she was, seated in Wyatt Carter's wagon, the town of Dry Creek growing smaller with every turn of the wheels. The clatter of hooves on the packed dirt road faded into the rhythm of something new, something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She had packed little, a carpetbag with 2 dresses, a shawl, and the few scraps of keepsakes she'd hidden over the years. The weight of her belongings felt pitiful, but as Wyatt had told her when he lifted her bag into the wagon bed, what you're bringing ain't near as important as what you're leaving behind. The journey to the ranch stretched across miles of rolling land. The autumn sun glowed warm on the fields, and Clara found herself breathing easier with every passing mile. Out here, the air was clean, free of the smoke and bitterness of town. The horizon stretched wide and endless, as though daring her to believe in possibilities. When they finally reached the ranch, Clara was stunned. Wyatt's house was simpler, sturdy 2-story cabin of weathered wood, its porch shaded by a sloping roof. A red barn stood nearby, with cattle grazing in the pasture beyond. Chickens scratched in the dirt, and a loyal-looking dog bounded up to greet them. It was not fancy, but it was alive. It was home. "This is it," Wyatt said, helping her down from the wagon. "It ain't much, but it's honest." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. She quickly blinked away. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The first days were not easy. Clara was unused to the rhythms of ranch life. The mornings came early, with roosters crowing before dawn. She struggled with the heavy work of hauling water, scrubbing laundry, and learning to cook meals that could satisfy a hard-working cowboy. Once, She burned the bread so badly it turned to ash, and she nearly burst into tears from embarrassment. Wyatt only chuckled gently, eating what he could. "I've eaten worse," he said with a wink. "And besides, practice makes perfect." His kindness softened her shame. The ranch itself offered quiet challenges. The land was vast and lonely, the silence pressing in on her at times. Clara, who had been surrounded by constant noise in the saloon, found the quiet unnerving. But Wyatt had a way of filling the silence without words. His steady presence, his calm manner, his occasional dry humor, they reassured her more than chatter ever could. Slowly, Clara began to find peace in the work. She loved the smell of fresh bread when she finally got it right, the feel of sun on her face when she hung laundry on the line, the sight of calves kicking up their heels in the pasture. She even found herself laughing one afternoon when the chickens chased her across the yard, feathers flying everywhere, while Wyatt leaned on the fence, grinning. At night, she sat on the porch beside him, watching the stars blaze across the endless sky. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But in those quiet moments, Clara felt something stirring inside her she hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Still, doubts lingered. She often caught herself wondering how long this peace would last. Would Wyatt one day look at her the way Henry Talbot had, seeing only her past, not her present? Could she really erase the shame of who she had been? One evening, as the sun sank low, Clara confessed some of her fears. "I keep waiting for the moment you regret bringing me here," she admitted softly. Wyatt turned toward her, his expression steady. "Clara, I don't regret a thing. You're here because you chose to be, and because I wanted you here. That's enough for me." The words settled into her heart like a bomb. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was beginning to live. The saloon girl who once carried trays through clouds of smoke was slowly being replaced by a woman who knelt in the garden, who baked bread, who sat on the porch and dreamed of tomorrow. For the first time, Clara felt that the Scarlet Rose belonged to another life, another woman. And this ranch, this man, this fragile hope was her new beginning. Clara had begun to believe that, perhaps, the ranch truly was a place where she could start again. The days stretched into weeks, and each morning she rose with purpose, her hands busy, her spirit lighter than she had ever thought possible. The sound of cattle lowing, the clatter of pans in the kitchen, the sight of Wyatt striding in from the fields, it was a rhythm that comforted her. But shadows have long memories, and Clara's shadow was not about to stay hidden. It began one warm afternoon when Clara walked into town to fetch supplies. Wyatt had offered to accompany her, but she insisted she could manage alone. After all, she told herself, she had nothing to fear anymore. She carried herself with more dignity now, her dress modest, her head held higher. Still, the moment she stepped onto Main Street, she felt eyes on her. Whispers followed her like a chill breeze. Some women turned away, their faces pinched, while a group of men near the saloon smirked knowingly. Clara quickened her steps, refusing to let them see her falter. She was no longer that girl who carried whiskey trays under smoky lamplight. She would not be dragged back into that world. But fate had other plans. From the shadows of the Scarlet Rose's porch, a voice called out, dripping with mockery, "Well, I'll be if it ain't little Clara, playing house with a rancher." Her stomach knotted. She recognized that voice instantly. Silas Boone, one of the saloon's regulars, a man with a cruel streak and a long memory. He sauntered toward her, his grin wide and mean. "Didn't think you'd last long out here. What's the cowboy gonna say when he finds out just how many drinks you poured, and how many men you entertained?" Clara's breath caught. "Leave me be, Silas." But Silas wasn't alone. Behind him came Henry Talbot, the very man who had once promised to take her as a mail-order bride, only to humiliate her in front of the town. He tipped his hat mockingly, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "I see you found yourself another fool to trick, Clara. Poor Wyatt Carter. He thinks he's got himself a saint when all he's really got is a saloon girl who couldn't keep her skirts clean." The words sliced through her, sharp and cruel. The people nearby paused, listening, some with pity, others with smug judgment. Clara's cheeks burned hot with shame, her pride crumbling under the weight of old scars. She wanted to shout that they were wrong, that she had changed, but the words stuck in her throat. She fled. Clutching her basket, she hurried down the street, her eyes blurred with tears. Behind her, she heard laughter, Silas's coarse and bitter, Henry's smooth and mocking. Each sound echoed in her chest, a reminder that her past was not finished. With her, when she returned to the ranch, Wyatt was waiting on the porch, his brow furrowed at the sight of her pale face. "Clara, what happened?" She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to confess the whole truth, that men like Silas and Henry would never let her forget who she had been, that the shame of her past still clung to her no matter how far she ran. But fear gripped her. What if Wyatt believed them? What if his respect, so carefully built, shattered like glass? I just needed to get home," she said, her voice trembling. She set down the basket and tried to smile, but Wyatt's eyes narrowed with quiet concern. He didn't press her, not yet, but she knew he sensed there was more. That night, sleep would not come. she sat by the window, staring out at the moonlit fields. The ranch felt safe, but the safety was fragile. If Silas and Henry spread their words, if Wyatt heard the ugliest versions of her story before she could speak it herself, she could lose everything. The next morning, Clara rose before dawn, her heart heavy. She knew she couldn't outrun her past forever. At some point, she would have to face it and risk telling Wyatt the truth. But the thought of seeing disappointment in his eyes, of watching him turn away as so many others had, terrified her. The shadows of her past had found her again, and this time, she wasn't sure if her fragile new beginning would survive. The days following Clara's encounter in town felt heavy with unspoken fear. She moved through her chores on the ranch with practiced grace feeding the chickens, stirring stew over the fire, tending to the laundry, but her heart was elsewhere. Every laugh from Wyatt, every glance filled with warmth, felt like a knife twisting deeper. He trusted her. He believed in her. But did he know the truth? The shadows of her past clung tighter with every passing day. She saw the whispers in town, spreading sly looks, muttered words when she passed by. Silas and Henry had made sure of it, and though Wyatt hadn't spoken of it, Clara could sense the shift in his eyes. Not suspicion, not yet, but concern. A quiet knowing that she was hiding something. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields in shades of gold, Clara stood on the porch, staring at the horizon. Wyatt came up behind her, the wood creaking under his boots. He didn't speak at first, simply resting his hands on the railing beside her. The silence stretched until she thought she would break under it. Finally, his voice, low and steady. "Clara, whatever it is, you can tell me." Her breath caught. She had prayed for strength, for a chance to bury her past forever, but Wyatt's kindness made hiding impossible. Tears pricked at her eyes. She turned to him, her hands twisting in her skirts. "I have to tell you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Before someone else does." Wyatt's gaze didn't waver. "Then tell me." Clara closed her eyes, drawing in a trembling breath. "I wasn't the woman you thought I was when you found me. I wasn't just a girl down on her luck. I worked in the Scarlet Rose Saloon. I wore dresses meant to draw men's eyes. I smiled when I wanted to cry. I carried trays of whiskey and laughed at their crude jokes, because if I didn't, I'd lose my job. And worse, people thought I was more than just a girl who served drinks. They assumed things, and I let them think it, because what choice did I have? A saloon girl never had the right to say no without consequence." Her voice cracked. She turned away, ashamed to see the look in his eyes. "I thought if I came here, I could leave it behind. But Silas, Henry, they won't let me forget. And if you hate me now, I understand. Everyone else always has." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Clara's chest ached as she waited, bracing for rejection, for anger, for the disgust she knew so well. But when Wyatt spoke, his voice was steady, almost tender. "Clara, look at me." She hesitated, then turned. To her shock, there was no condemnation in his gaze. Only sorrow and something deeper. "You think less of yourself because of what you survived," he said. "But don't you see? You endured what would have broken. Most you didn't choose that life, you were trapped in it. And still, you came out of it with kindness in your heart. That's what I see when I look at you. Not shame, not sin, strength." Clara blinked, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "But the town, let them talk," Wyatt cut in, his voice firm. "They don't know you. They only see what's easy to condemn. I've lived long enough to know everyone carries scars. Some are just easier to hide. I've got my own past, Clara. Losses that hollowed me out. Loneliness that made me cold. But meeting you, it gave me something I thought I'd never have again. Don't you see? We're both starting over." His words struck her like sunlight. Breaking through storm clouds, she pressed a hand to her mouth, unable to speak. Overwhelmed by the truth in his eyes, Wyatt reached for her hands, pulling them gently into his. "You don't have to be afraid of me leaving. I didn't ask you here for perfection. I asked you because I saw the woman you are now. And that woman is worth more to me than all the gossip in town." The dam broke then. Clara collapsed against him, her tears wetting his shirt. Wyatt held her tightly, his arm strong and steady, as though he could shield her from the whole world. For the first time in years, she didn't feel stained by her past. She felt free. When she finally pulled back, Wyatt brushed a tear from her cheek. "So," he said softly, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips, "are you ready to stop running from shadows and start living with me in the light?" Clara laughed through her tears, a sound half broken and half joyful. "Yes, Wyatt, I'm ready." The fear that had clung to her for so long loosened its grip. In its place bloomed hope, real, steady, unshakable. Her past was no longer a chain, because Wyatt had chosen her, not despite her scars, but with them, and for the first time, she began to believe she truly was worthy of love. The morning dawned, bright and clear, as if the heavens themselves were blessing the day. For Clara, it felt unreal. She stood before the small mirror in her room, her trembling fingers smoothing the simple ivory dress she had sewn from fabric Wyatt had insisted on buying for her in town. It wasn't grand, nothing like the satin gowns she had once watched other women flaunt, but to her it was beautiful, a symbol of hope, of starting anew. Her heart raced. She had never dared to dream of a wedding. Her life had been a string of survival, never a future, never a family. But now, as the ranch buzzed with gentle preparations, as neighbors who respected Wyatt gathered to celebrate, Clara realized she had been given something she thought lost forever, a chance to belong. She touched the ribbon Wyatt had tied in her hair the night before. "So you'll know you're loved," he had whispered with a boyish grin. The memory brought tears to her eyes, and she pressed a hand over her heart to steady herself. Outside, Wyatt stood beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the ranch, the very place where Clara had first admitted her fears to him. He wore a clean white shirt and a black vest, his hat in his hands. He looked every bit the strong cowboy who had faced life's storms and still found the courage to open his heart again. But there was more in his eyes, now, a tenderness that only she had drawn out of him. When Clara stepped into view, gasps rippled through the small crowd. She felt the weight of their stares, the murmurs she had dreaded for so long. But then she saw Wyatt's face. The way he looked at her as though she were the only woman in the world burned away her fear. Every step she took toward him was a step away from the past, away from the smoky haze of the scarlet rose, away from shame and whispers. Each footfall carried her closer to the life she had thought forever denied her. At the base of the oak, Wyatt reached for her hands. His were steady, warm, grounding. "Her, Clara," he said softly, loud enough for all to hear, but meant only for her. "I never thought I'd find someone who could make this place feel alive again. But you walked into my life, and suddenly, everything changed. You're my partner, my strength, my home. I promise to stand beside you, no matter what storms come our way." Tears blurred Clara's vision, but her smile broke radiant through them. She took a breath, her voice trembling but true. "Wyatt, I spent so long believing I wasn't worthy of love. But you saw me when no one else would. You gave me a future when I thought all I had was the past. I promise to love you with all that I am, to cherish the life we build together, and to never stop being grateful for the day you chose me." The simple vows carried more weight than any grand words could. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt didn't hesitate. He pulled Clara close and kissed her, slow and sure, sealing the promise not just with words but with devotion. The crowd cheered, some wiping tears from their eyes. Even the skeptics who had whispered about Clara's past could not deny the power of what they saw, the unmistakable bond between two hearts that had healed each other. The celebration was humble but filled with joy. Neighbors brought pies and bread, children ran through the fields laughing, and music filled the air as a fiddle struck up a lively tune. Clara found herself swept into dances, laughter bubbling up from her chest, unforced and free. For once, she wasn't the object of judgment or pity. She was a bride, a wife, a woman, cherished. Later, as twilight settled and lanterns flickered softly around the ranch, Wyatt led Clara away from the crowd. Hand in hand, they walked to the porch where it had all begun. The night air was cool, filled with the scent of wildflowers. Wyatt drew her close, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Mrs. Callahan," he said with a smile, savoring the sound of her new name. Clara laughed, her heart full. "That will take some getting used to." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "You'll see, it'll fit just right." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For so long, she had known only fear, only struggle. But here, in Wyatt's arms, she felt safe. She felt whole. The ranch stretched before them, vast and filled with promise. Together, they would work the land, face hardships, and share triumphs. And through it all, Clara knew she would never again be alone, never again be defined by the shadows of her past. She had been a saloon girl once, scorned and forgotten. But now she was a bride, a wife, and soon she hoped a mother. Most of all, she was loved, and that love, she knew, was the true beginning of her forever.